Hi, I'm Parneet Jaggi, and this is going to be a series of lectures on the famous play St. Joan, written by George Bernard Shaw. Now, we know George Bernard Shaw as a popular playwright and an expert in English language. Let's have a brief introduction of Shaw. George Bernard Shaw was born in Dublin and was the son of a civil servant. He moved to London as a young man in 1876 and he established himself as a leading music and theatre critic in the 80s and 90s and became a prominent member of the Fabian Society. Shaw began his literary career as a novelist and as a fervent advocate of the new theatre of Ibsen. His earliest dramas were called appropriately Plays Pleasant and Unpleasant. His complete works appeared in 36 volumes between 1930 and 50, the year of his death. He died in 1950. Now we have a plethora of his writings and his plays, but to name just a few important ones, we have Widower's Houses, Mrs. Warren's Profession, Arms and the Man of Destiny, Man and Superman, Back to Methuselah, St. Joan, Caesar and Cleopatra, Major Barbara, The Doctor's Dilemma, Candida, Pygmalion. Now, what is this play about, St. Joan, that we're going to talk about? Now, this, as the title indicates, is a kind of a historical play with a historical background that we'll be knowing before we start with the synopsis and overview of the play. Now, this was written and premiered in 1923, and Joan of Arc, we know her as a great historical figure who later attained the status of saintlyhood. Shaw had been quite curious about her life, her history, and the eventful life that she had gone through. So he considered writing this play about her in around 1913. Now in 1920, when Joan was canonized by the Catholic Church, her story and her biography received considerable attention. So this boosted his motive to write a play telling Joan's story. Now, St. Joan as a play was staged for the first time at the Garrick Theatre in New York in December 1923, and Shaw has made use of numerous historical sources, including the transcripts of Joan's trial. Now, this play had an important role in cementing and establishing Shaw's reputation as a playwright to the extent that in 1926 he received the Nobel Prize for Literature. Now, when we talk of St. Joan, it becomes imperative to go back to the historical background where the story of this girl, St. Joan, who was later canonized as a saint years after her death. So we need to know a little bit about the historical background where this play is set. So the play is set between 1429 and 1431 with an epilogue set in 1456. Now during this time, the 100 Years' War was raging between England and France, and English forces had occupied a number of French cities and towns. The play begins with Joan asking a French nobleman, Robert de Baudricourt, to provide her with armor, a horse and soldiers. Now, who is Joan? She's a young girl, adolescent girl from a small countryside village, but she has had visions of saints telling her that it is her destiny to lead the French forces to victory and ensure that the Dauphin, heir to the throne, is officially crowned as the King of France. Now, Robert is hesitant to support Joan because she is young, she is innocent, she is untrained, and they cannot really infer from her looks that she can do something of this magnitude. But he gives in when he sees that she is capable of inspiring the soldiers, the men, to fight for her. So what happens is, Joan travels to Chinon, where the Dauphin has set up an informal court of his own. Despite an attempt to trick her, she easily identifies the Dauphin, which further encourages the others to see her as an angel kind of a character who is guided by God. Now, Joan persuades the Dauphin that she is going to free the city of Orleans, which has been held under siege by the English forces, and have crowned at Rheims Cathedral. Leading the troops, then, Joan goes to Orleans, where the French forces are completely frustrated. They need the winds of change so that they can sail upriver and attack the English from behind. Now Joan prays. Here her prayers work and the wind immediately changes, allowing the French forces to win a triumphant victory over the English soldiers. Now, when we reach this juncture in the story, we see that the French victory at Orleans, where Joan leads the army and her prayers work a miracle, this French victory changes the tide of the war, which worries the English leaders. Earlier in the war, the English had formed an alliance with the Burgundians, a French faction who opposed the royal house to which Charles belonged. Now, what is happening here is, there's a character, a nobleman named Warwick. Now, this Warwick meets the caution, a bishop, a Burgundian bishop. So, both men agree that Joan is very dangerous, and she must be eliminated. Now, meanwhile, Charles has been crowned at Rheims Cathedral, and Joan is worried because she seems to be becoming unpopular, and several people have now started accusing her of being proud and reckless and stubborn. Now, when Charles is crowned as the king, Joan wants to lead the forces to try to take back Paris from the English, but no one supports her plan. Nonetheless, Joan insists that she will go ahead and she has to follow God's orders. So the action is quite fast over here when she, despite the lack of support by the French forces, she decides to follow God's orders and move and proceed towards her war with the English. Now the action of the play then jumps 2 years ahead to 1431. Now, in this meantime, in the interim, Joan has been captured already by the Burgundian forces and sold to the English. Now she is on a trial on the charges of heresy, with a number of church officials questioning her. Now, what has happened is, the French armies were already very doubtful as to how they could go with Joan as their leader and defend the English army. And in the meanwhile, the Burgundian forces have captured Joan and sold her to the English army. So naturally, there is a trial going on charges of heresy against this girl, and the church officials also are questioning her. They are completely against her. But what is happening to Joan is, she is undaunted. She is unrivaled, undefeated. She defends her decision. She wears men's clothes. She insists that her voices are truly the voices of the divine messengers. She only wavers when she is threatened with execution, at which Joan signs a confession and a recantation. However, she is horrified to realize that even though her life will be spared, she is still going to be imprisoned for life. So faced with this kind of a fate, she tears up her confession. She does not want to be imprisoned and die like a slave, like a prisoner all her life with the English forces. So when she tears up her confession letter, she is immediately taken out to be executed. Now, we are not taken directly to that scene of execution, but it is reported by the other characters that she showed great strength and courage during her painful execution. Then we have an epilogue to the play, which is set 25 years later. An inquiry has been held into Joan's trial, and the charges have been reversed. Joan has now suddenly been declared innocent. Now, what has happened? Actually, in the epilogue, we come to a new discovery. Her spirits have been appearing in a vision to King Charles, who is now successfully ruling as a strong French king thanks to Saint Joan. Now the pair are joined by many other characters, showing that Joan has now been vindicated and her enemies have been proven wrong. Eventually, a man dressed in 1920s style clothing appears and announces that Joan has been declared a saint. Excited by all of this praise and recognition, Joan suggests that maybe she should return to life. However, all of her seeming allies immediately abandon her, making excuses for why this is not a good idea. At the end of the play, Joan is left alone, wondering when the world will be ready to completely embrace her. So this is how the historical background of Saint Joan as a girl, as a warrior, as a fighter, and then the way she is executed by the English forces is brought to the forefront through this fictionalized historical play. Now, the lead role of Saint Joan as a character was quickly recognized in this play as a challenging and important role for a female actor. So the play was staged regularly throughout the 20th and the 21st centuries, and later it was also adapted into a film. And then again, a production of the play ran at the Manhattan Theatre Club in New York with an actress, Rashid, who won a Best Actress award honoring her portrayal of Joan. So we see how Saint Joan kind of eternalized George Bernard Shaw also, and his love for history and literature. We'll discuss the plot overview and the characteristics of the play in the coming lectures. Thank you for now.